Welcome to the KOMO Sports End Zone podcast with KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and Najee Moye.
You know, Najee, I'm going to be honest with you. First of all, welcome to the KOMO Sports End Zone.
Hello.
I'm Niko Tamurian. He's Najee Moye.
Hello. How's it going?
That, vroom, vroom, vroom at the end of the open there. That kind of gets me jacked up, man.
You know, honestly, if you can't see it, watching on YouTube, I'm always like this, like the zoom, 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 zoom at the beginning there. But it's a good open. I like it.
It is. Well, I'm going to say this. Right now, we're at this point of Seattle sports where it's you could say now or never. It's whatever you want to say. The stuff that's going on right now is going to determine how happy or sad we are the next few months. Whether it's the Sounders, the Storm, but of course our primary focus in this show, at least for this week, is the Mariners. And much chronicled, that 10-game lead in the American League West was cut down to 1 by the All-Star break, and now it's a fight to the finish with Houston. And it's just a really interesting way to look at it because, again, we talked about this before, Naj, if you had said to me back in March, the Mariners will be in first at the All-Star break, like, shoot, sign me up.
Sign you up. But
now
things have changed,
yes.
Niko. And, I always say baseball is a really funny sport because, the lead over the Astros was commanding. I would say mostly because of how badly the Astros started the year. The Mariners have been more or less steady since then. But 10 games, that was a 9-game change in about 2 or 3 months. It's been absolutely crazy. Not saying the Mariners have been playing bad baseball, but this just speaks to how good the Astros are, how good the Astros have been. This has been the story for the past 3 years, Niko.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things. I think the analogy I've used with you, I can't remember if it's on the show or just talking in private. The Astros are almost like the Detroit Pistons to the Mariners, Chicago Bulls. Maybe Julio's MJ. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch.
Yeah, Julio's definitely MJ.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there's always that team you have to hurdle on your quest for glory, and the Astros have been a boy staunch opponent, and certainly the Rangers won the whole thing last year. I'm not discounting them, but the Astros are the rival, right? Like, and when you look at what the Rangers did last year, like, yes, they got in over the M's, all that stuff, but it wasn't like Mariners fans like, oh, I hate Texas or whatever. But the Astros, there's real,
hatred there,
without a doubt. And so when you have a 10-game lead and it's cut down to 1, and now this is the team you're fighting. I mean, who else would you rather be fighting? But also, you'd rather have that be the 10-game lead that we saw just about a month ago or so ago. And so,
we've seen things like this happen across baseball, though, like throughout the year. I mean, we've seen the AL East also flip-flop several times since the beginning of the year. A lot of teams are just kind of, and it's a long season, and that's what I want to tell myself and tell Mariners fans everywhere that this is a long season. We're at the halfway point. We just went past the All-Star break. If you're listening, we're recording this on a Wednesday night, right after the All-Star game. Great game, by the way. Terrible jerseys. Terrible jerseys. But this is kind of what happens. I mean, now we're getting really into are these the dog days? Not dog days.
All-Star week in Seattle sports is the dog days.
Yeah.
But once it ends, it's like, you have this going. Seahawks start camp next week. Like, everything gets going, and once it gets going, it doesn't quite stop.
Yeah, honestly, and coming out of the break, the Mariners have a massive, I would call this a must-win series. They're starting the hosting the Houston Astros, those same Houston Astros we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, for a 3-game set at T-Mobile Park. I'm jacked up about this because there's no reason why the Mariners should get swept, or they maybe even lose a game. I mean, honestly, the Mariners should win this series 100%, I think. But this is a massive series, and T-Mobile Park is going to be rocking, and everyone should go.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that too, Najee, is that, listen, it's 3 games of about 70, less than 70 now to go. Is it definition like must win? Of course not, but you're spot on that it's must win.
These are games you want to win.
You have to win these things.
You want to win these games.
If you come out of the All-Star break, let's go worst case scenario and say you're swept, and you go and you're suddenly 2 back and like insurmountable, of course not. But in baseball, where superstition and everything else that isn't on the field necessarily wins the day, it would be brutal to try and overcome that. And I'll add this to the fact, Seattle sports radio here in town, they posed the question, was the first half of the season a success? And by any definition, I thought that was really, really provocative. I thought it was a great job on their part, because by any definition of success, first place works.
First place in the AL West.
But that's not how anybody in this fan base feels. And that feeling gets amplified by what you do right out of the gates here in the second half.
Okay, so I want to talk about the success word, because success can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. I would consider it a successful first half of the season. You go into the first. I mean, you start as the Mariners, by the way, who are I don't want to call them the perennial underdogs, but a lot of the people in town and around baseball may see them as that, seeing as they haven't won a World Series ever.
Yeah.
But you're still leading the AL West. It is by a game. At one point, it was 10 games. You see how good the team can be. And like I said, it's a long season. Leading your division at the halftime break, I would consider it a success. And I was going to ask you this question later on, but I mean, what grade would you give the Mariners for the first half of the year? And I would give them a B+ because it's not that 10-game lead is not long. It's gone.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that I'd be in that B range as well, B or B+. And I think that it's crazy that we're talking about a first place team. We're not giving them an A from the merit, but you're right. But there's no other thing to give them. I mean, I think anything lower than a B is too harsh for a first place team. And I think giving them the A discounts, the glaring issues with this team, whether it was giving up that lead or obviously the bats and what they need to do. And certainly something we'll talk about in just a few minutes, but that's just it. And so I think this is when, listen, every Mariners fan and every player and coach on that team, rightfully so, is focused on right here and now.
Right.
And that's all that matters. But I think when you're analyzing something from this situation, you almost do have to take a step back and say, okay, what is the state of the Mariners? And after you missed in 2022, it was as high as it could be. You missed by one game last year. Okay. That puts extra importance on making it this year, because if you, in this narrow window, and it's such a narrow window in baseball where guys are affordable, because they've drafted amazingly. I mean, if the one thing the Mariners do impeccably well, it's draft.
Right.
And the guys like Logan Gilbert, especially Logan, get awfully a lot more expensive after this season. And so the window we're talking about is right now.
Yeah, and the window's open right now, and that's why I think.
And if you get miss the playoffs twice in a row in that window,
no, you can't do it.
Yeah,
no, especially after getting the taste of the playoffs 3 years ago, I should say. These you just can't. It's we talk about these leads and how quickly things can change. I mean, you talk about if the Mariners drop all 3 games against the Astros this weekend. The Mariners would be behind the Astros, but the Mariners currently only have a 5-game lead over the defending World Series champions, the Texas Rangers. Also, we saw that the 10-game lead or the 9-game lead went away against the Astros. The Mariners are only up 10 games against the Angels.
Yeah, sure.
Things
and it's tight in the wild card too, even. Yeah,
and you don't even want to be in the wild card. You want to win the division.
Yeah, you got to.
I mean, at this point, winning the division with that rotation. And I know things can happen. I know the trade deadline's coming up in a couple weeks. We'll get to that, but we've talked about that. This is a must-win. All that to say that this weekend is a must-win. I want a sweep, baby.
Oh, well, Matt, and that's just it. We talked about the window a minute ago. Let's talk about the window of fans' patience.
Yeah.
I will say this: Mariners fans are among the most patient in baseball. They may not seem like it on social media, but it's because that patience has been tried and tried again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, you're in first place. Things are looking great. You're up by 10 games. At that point, you have an 86% chance to make the postseason, according to Baseball Reference and all this good stuff. And now you might be squandering it away. We certainly hope not. But so you're talking about a window with talent and affordability, but you're also talking about a window where the fans are giving you listen, Mariner fans are about as diehard and loyal as it comes. Right. They're never going to abandon the team, I don't think, unless something really bad. I mean, they sat through some pretty bad years of baseball in the last 20. But I guess that's another point to be made here from perception and looking at that. If you miss again this year, that's tough to overcome.
The vibes are not even great. Losing 3 straight games against the Angels is also not great either.
Yeah.
To go into the All-Star break. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we look at this and we look at the teams that they played. The Padres are really difficult. And the Blue Jays, I was at one of the Blue Jays games and it was like Toronto West. So it was absolutely insane, so many Blue Jays fans. They need to just show the league 100%. Don't come to Seattle and expect to win games.
Yeah.
Because you won't.
Sure. And that's they're much better at home.
Yes.
That gives me optimism for this weekend series. Everybody starts fresh. Everybody's rested. The 2 All-Stars, Logan and Andres, didn't even play in the All-Star game. I mean, obviously Logan started Sunday, so that was a little bit of a different animal. And so, maybe this is just a bit of a reset that they needed because they had a grueling schedule. They played some tough teams. maybe they were running into a little bit of the dog days of summer when they were losing series against teams. Yeah. So that's a hope. But to your point, this is huge this weekend.
Yeah.
You can't, you have to win minimum 2.
You need to.
And
that ballpark, I don't know if it's sold out yet, and it probably will be by the time we get closer to Friday. But that's the game that no one wants to miss, no one wants to lose. Also, so I'm excited.
I am too.
Yeah.
I think that, again, to kind of reiterate what you said, if you win this series, and especially if you do it by, I don't want to say solving, but by getting runs, by putting aside that issue that this offense has been so wildly inconsistent. If you do it by scoring runs, and certainly the pitching is always going to be very good, if not dominant. But if you do it by scoring runs, you hit a lot of momentum heading in here.
I always say, the Mariners will win 90% of the games that they can just score 5 runs.
Yeah,
it's better said than done, But I mean, it's definitely harder to win games 1-0, 1-1, or 2-1. I'm sorry, and it's tough, and it's the same thing I've said about the Mariners for the past 3 years. They need a guy. They need a guy who's scary. Maybe is that Luis Robert? Could be. Is that Alonso? The Mets are probably going to hold on to Alonso now.
Yeah, they suddenly look decent.
I guess, I'm swinging the bat here because I'm wondering where the ball's going to go. Is it fair or foul, Niko? How about that? Wow.
Fair or foul.
Fair or foul.
Can the Mariners win the American League West with their current roster? Look at you hemming and hawing over there.
I'm hemming and hawing because, they could. It won't be easy. A lot of things can happen. Obviously, baseball's a really funny sport.
Yeah.
Can they win the American League West with their current roster? At times, the roster, the lineup looks really, really good.
Sure.
The rotation is super solid, as I've said many, many times. The bullpen can use some help, but the lineup just doesn't really have, unless Julio Rodriguez goes to Julio like he was 2 years ago and last year, which we've seen him come on better. He had a slow 2 months of the year, first 2 months of the year. It's tough to say. I would say they have maybe a 30% chance to win the AL West with that roster as it is right now. I mean, they're definitely looking, Niko.
Well, Julio is the one guy who didn't want the All-Star break to come because he was really heating up before it. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I'm going to pop it back on the screen for our YouTube audience. Can the Mariners win the AL West with their current roster? You hit the nail on the head. Yes, they can. But the way we've been seeing them trend and how the season is 3.5 months old, more than halfway done, and you still aren't getting consistency on offense.
No.
And so at some point, does it have to be the huge home run swing of a Vlad Guerrero or Luis Robert, or like even if you could pull those off? No, it doesn't. I mean, talk about energizing a fan base. That'd be great. But does it have to be that? No, it doesn't even have to be the Cody Bellingers, Niko Horners of the world. It can even be, great name, by the way.
A great name.
It could be just something to give you more average on this team, to allow this team to just get more traffic on base and just create some more runs. I mean, we're talking about a team that you and I have talked about for months as a World Series caliber rotation, but they're losing too many games 2-1 and 1-0 and whatever it might be.
A rotation that stayed mostly healthy through the first half,
which is crazy. I mean, Brian Woo's had some issues, but Emerson Hancock has been admirable filling in, and so it's, I think.
And Emerson Hancock is good enough to be a number 2 starter in any of the rotations.
A little while, yeah. I mean, and I hope they hang on to him.
Yeah, no, honestly. Well, I think if they want to get someone like, and if we talk about Vladdy, we talk about Alonso, who's probably not going to move, I don't think. I think it will take a lot for the Blue Jays to even just, because moving Vlad and Bo Bichette will even just, that's just the Blue Jays admitted to themselves that their whole vibe that they've been trying to do for the past couple of years is just not working.
Yeah,
it's hard to say, but like I said, when you look in the teams around you in that division, Baltimore and New York are fighting for the first place, and also Boston's fighting for third.
Yeah.
So maybe they move, but it's going to cost. That's the thing. So I don't know what the Mariners are willing to give up. I'm sure Mariners fans will like some home runs, or even some timely hitting, like you mentioned. It doesn't have to be the big bash 'em guys. Honestly, this talk of maybe adding a guy from Miami, Niko, right?
Yeah, and that's time for our next fair or foul, which is me on the fly, fair or fouling. We didn't talk about this pre-show.
That's okay.
Fair or foul.
We don't talk about anything pre-show.
I'm gonna kind of make this a two-part fair or foul.
Okay.
A, the Mariners trade for Jazz Chisholm. B, he can be a difference maker for this Mariners team should they give up a bunch of prospects to get him.
I've always been a big fan of Jazz Chisholm. I think he's a really exciting player. He's a menace on the bases. He can hit for power. He's not exactly a big guy. I wouldn't consider him a power hitter. He's a second baseman who can play center. Center field's taken right now for the Mariners by Julio. I don't know exactly if the Mariners should trade the house for him.
Right.
He's not worth trading the house for. I don't think. Especially because his numbers this year just aren't that great.
Right.
You know. I do think the Yankees may make a move on him.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly. I just don't see him in Seattle.
Yeah, listen, everything you said about Chisholm, we're supposed to disagree on these shows, but
we're supposed to.
But Chisholm, I think he's a heck of a player. I've loved watching.
He's one of my favorites, honestly.
Yeah. But is he? And I think he fits the Mariners mold. They love to just get traffic and create havoc on the bases, and we got Cal Raleigh stealing 5 bases already in the first half. You know what I'm saying? So he works in a lot of ways like that. But ultimately, you mentioned the numbers being down a bit this year, and down around 250 for average, and which is upper echelon for this Mariners team, honestly.
Which is interesting that you mentioned that, because it's like, well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think he makes sense, but I think that I think that I talk about not necessarily needing a big swing, like a huge name coming in, and that may be true from an on-field standpoint, from the talent that the Mariners already have, from an X's and O's standpoint, but from a fan standpoint. I mean, these fans were ready to go wild in the offseason. Like, they were really upset.
Yeah.
And I understand it completely. You win the fan base. Now, that can't be the primary focus of Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander. You can't make a big swing because it's going to get fans excited, and then you don't believe in the move, and for good reason if the guy doesn't pan out. But, you're talking about making a big swing just to energize and jolt things in the second half and maybe create a little buzz and aura and that sort of thing. And I think that when you do that kind of stuff, it can lead to more wins. It's almost like look good, feel good, play good. Like, hey, we got Jazz on our side, or we got Vladdy on our side. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So
aura counts.
It does.
It does. It really does.
More in baseball, I think, than any other sport.
I think you're probably right. It definitely doesn't count in basketball.
No,
because you'll have guys that are like, you'll have a big three, like Phoenix, for example.
Yeah.
With Bradley Beal, and it just did not work out.
Yeah.
With football, you can add a guy like Aaron Rodgers. We'll see how that worked out this year. But with baseball, you just add just a presence.
Yeah.
And just even on the base pass, I mean, you can definitely feel it, especially when the guy can steal a bunch of bases like Jazz can. But you mentioned that his average is down for him this year, but at the higher echelon for the Mariners. I think that'd be interesting.
Okay, listen, if they trade, I'm going to throw a scenario out there.
Okay.
If they were to trade, say, Harry Ford.
No.
You want to give up Harry?
Not for
I think he's a trade candidate because we saw them play him in the outfield. Maybe that's a future thing because Cal's your catcher for the foreseeable future.
Right. But I just don't think I think maybe only you add Harry Ford, and I've talked about maybe, sweetening the pot with a pitcher or two. Pitcher, not two.
Right.
For a guy like the Polar Bear. For someone like Luis Torres or even Bo Bichette, maybe. I just don't see it with. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot.
What I would say too, when you're talking about prospective Mariners trade packages, when you're talking about the big fish out there,
right?
Given that there's limited available difference makers on the market, but there's a reason you and I keep talking about the same 5 names because
it's very limited.
Every other team's either in the race, so to speak,
right,
or they, don't want to give up their stars. Like, we talk about Vlad Guerrero Jr. or Bo Bichette. Blue Jays may not want to, and understandably so, give those guys up.
And, the trade deadline is not till,
the 30th,
13 days, and the Mariners made, after this initial Houston series, they may decide after this, if they sweep them and they score a bunch of runs, they may not even worry about it.
Yeah.
Now that's a this week problem. That could also change next week, I think it's interesting though what the Mariners would do because I just say the Mariners have had the same issues for the past 3 years. Now, also I want to circle back to a guy that they had last year who now plays for the Dodgers, who I was a big fan of.
Oh, that hurts. But and I'm glad for Teo because he's a really good dude.
Shout out to Teoscar Hernandez. He always wanted to be in the home run derby.
Yeah,
and I watched every single swing. He cooked. He killed it. And I mentioned it before when the Dodgers played the Yankees earlier this year. I'm a big Yankee fan, of course, as I mentioned. He single-handedly beat the Yankees. I'm not gonna say that there's regrets because he did strike out a bunch. You kind of miss him.
Yeah, I think. Well, he said he just never got quite comfortable here, and sometimes it just doesn't work. Yeah, that's what he said after the Derby.
Right.
Sometimes that's just how it goes.
Right.
But
in LA, he's surrounded by those are the 4 guys on that lineup I'm mortified of, honestly. Yeah. He's surrounded by those guys. And maybe here he didn't have quite the same vibes. I know the environments are definitely different, Yeah. So I get it, but it was nice to see him win his first ever home run derby that he ever entered in. And
now he can't do it anymore. Like he's 1 for 1, just like never lost.
I don't know, man. You can keep doing it if you want to, but just ruin your swing until you just keep ruining the swing. But
no, gosh, I missed when all that was here last year.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun.
That was really fun.
Yeah, so you got me thinking here as we go. Is it really feasible that a Vlad or Bo Bichette probably get traded? Probably not. Same with Pete Alonso. And so I think when you're talking about the big swings, you're talking about the Cubs guys, Cody Bellinger, Nico Horner. You're talking about Jazz Chisholm. You're talking about Luis Robert. Robert probably gets the biggest haul of any of those guys.
Yeah.
I think that, the Mariners could make a move for Bellinger and or Horner, and I don't know what that costs you, but it's definitely going to hurt. But you get somebody like that,
If a lot of these teams that are leading the division or in the hunt to win their division, and they're looking to push them for anyone to push them over the edge. I'm talking league wide. These other teams will make you pay.
Yeah,
like you're gonna pay, and I like getting Bellinger and Horner honestly, but that's Harry Ford, that's a pitcher, that's prospect. That's
like Harry Ford. That's probably one of the young infielders like Ty Pete, who I love. Yeah. When I say young, like he's 18, he's a couple years, more than a couple years away from the majors, but he's going to be a good one.
Right.
It's going to hurt, but you have to have a little bit of that sacrifice to try and make sure you win the division this year for the first time since 01.
When you're in win now mode, you have to do what it takes. I mean, and that's not something we've seen a lot from the Mariners in recent history. We saw that with the Luis Castillo trade a couple years 2 years ago. And look how much he's paid off.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I think that that's a great point you bring up, Najee, because that Luis Castillo trade, they some fans in that moment, as great as The Rock is, they were a little bit cringy about giving up Levi Stout and then of course Noelvi Marte. Well, Stout, the Mariners even got him back and dropped him. Like he was a free agent, was released, and just has struggled since.
Right.
And Marte, a good ball player, but as we know, was suspended 80 games for PED stuff. So,
you just gotta be smart about it. Yeah.
Right. Well, sometimes what seems like it's going to really hurt, can end up being okay. I mean, the Mariners have hands down won that trade, and the Mariners do have perhaps the deepest farm system in baseball, especially for a contending team. So, God, you don't want to get rid of any of those guys.
Buy.
But you got to buy.
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 No. I mean, you really can, I'm saying the Mariners could just, at this point.
Well, I think you were saying, I interpreted that as you have to buy by saying buy to your prospects.
Literally.
Was that what you're doing?
That's exact. Yeah. I was doing, I was doing a.
I was like, that was really clever, man. I liked it.
Sync thing. Is it NSYNC or Backstreet Boys? I'm not dead sure. The people in comments will tell me. Ain't no love.
NSYNC, I think.
NSYNC, okay.
Just because I'm old.
I was curious. I was like, I wanted that way. That's what it was. The Mariners want.
That's Backstreet Boys, yeah.
That's very important. Also.
We've got a couple minutes left in this show here. Let me wrap up our Mariners conversation by saying fair or foul. They can win the AL West with the current roster. Of course they could, but will they is a different answer.
Right.
Fair or foul, Jazz Chisholm is the guy they're going to go for. We're both kind of it could be, but we're not over the moon about that.
Right.
I mean, I think it'd be a nice addition depending on when you give up.
He has a huge aura, and he's a hard worker.
I think it'd be cool. I enjoy it. It's just, it'd be tough to give up who you have to give up to get him. Yeah. I want to spend a couple minutes on something that has completely and drastically changed my life and our conversation with you in the newsroom.
Okay.
It's really, it's been life-changing. It's really serious stuff. The release of NCAA Football 25.
Shout out to NIL, man. Let me tell you, because
it's trying to get big choked up there.
It's literally been since I was a junior in college.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting until the game formally releases. Niko,
I did early. I mean, what can you say?
Has been balling out, and Niko has.
Can we talk about this for a minute? It's really hard, the game. It's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. It's just like you remember it. It's different than Madden.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. What's really cool about it is that it's everything you remember it, but just like next gen, PS5, Xbox, XS, whatever you want to call it. So
XS.
XS. I don't have an Xbox. I have a PlayStation 5.
Okay, I see.
You have an Xbox, right?
Xbox Series X.
Series
XS.
S.
Yes.
It's so darn fun, but gosh, is it difficult. And like, you remember like in the old game, you'd say, oh, the computer's cheating because they'd get some crazy like bounce off your guy and run 80 yards or
sure.
They definitely do that stuff.
Right.
However, have I the last 3 nights since I've gotten out of work, like played that and until I have to go to bed? Yeah. Have I started a dynasty with the Huskies? Yes. Have I worn every uniform combination of the Cougs, which was like 8 of them? By the way, that's really cool. Yeah. Yes.
The Cougs have great colors.
They have great, I'm a big fan. I think they call it anthracite. When the Cougs have that like dark gray alternate jersey that goes with their crimson. Oof, so cool.
It's a good look.
Yeah. And then for the Dogs, I'm a little disappointed in the lack of uniform stuff. Like, for example, for UW, you get 2 helmets, the gold one or the purple chrome that they only wore for the one game that they barely beat Arizona State last year.
Right.
But it's awesome and it's back, and it's a lot more than just a video game because this is something a lot of kids grew up with. A lot of people in their 30s as kids grew up with.
A lot of people who have to work for a living.
Yes.
have to like literally. I mean, I remember just with my friends in college, post-college, burning the heck out of the NCAA 14.
Yeah.
Because it is such a fun, enjoyable game. Just you get the chance to take your favorite school, a small school, big school, whatever school you want, and just like put your stamp on it. You can be Nick Saban, and who doesn't want to be Nick Saban?
Right.
Awesome. I'm really excited. What's the vibe like at playing at the Huskies? In the setting such
my God.
Husky Stadium.
So cool.
Right.
They're led on the field by Dubs,
Love
who is
that.
my best friend, as you know.
Yeah. He's covered up.
Every touchdown. Yeah, Dubs is over here, but we have to cover him up because the AI camera thinks my face is over here. So that's why we have to. But I love that dog. And he runs. And what's funny? I was showing my wife. They'll like randomly like be the end of the first quarter, and they just show Dub at his doghouse like licking his paws. I'm like, what is happening? But they have the pageantry of college football down in the atmosphere. Like you force a team 3 and out, and all of a sudden it plays the dun 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 dun, and they bow down to Washington. And I'm a huge fan of the UW fight song. I think it just like gives you chills sometimes.
But like you said, the game is hard. I mean, even
field goal kicking is impossible.
Well, and if you watch college football, how impossible field goal kicking.
But that's why I kind of get frustrated the hell out of me. But I appreciate the accuracy.
And you mentioned how difficult it is, and how even a team like Washington last year. This is not last year's team that's in the game, but even struggled against Arizona State.
Yeah,
Niko has a losing record right now. I hate to tell you guys. Yeah, I did it.
Everybody.
I did it. Now, I haven't even played the game yet because
Eastern Michigan almost beat me with the Huskies.
Michigan. The Big Ten is hard.
Well, yeah. So it's and we're not even in Big Ten play. So
yeah. I'm excited for the game.
Me too.
It's literally like a defining game because we wouldn't even have this.
Yeah.
Other than having, we have actual people in the game. And I think it's really awesome.
Yeah.
Everyone who's in the game gets a free copy of the game
and a few $100, like 600, I think.
Yeah, and how hard was that?
Sure. And it seemed almost too easy, but they weren't allowed to get paid back then, which was so stupid.
I mean, and it's been long. Like it's been a long time. I'm 32 years old. I was a junior in college, and Edgewater University. Playing that game with roommates, and it's just the vibes are back, baby.
The vibes are back.
The vibes are back.
Najee,
Niko.
So you'll be Miami. I'll be the Huskies. Is that you?
I'll probably be Miami. I have a couple. I haven't done a signing day yet. I don't know who I'm.
When you get online, we'll have to play.
We'll have to talk about who I'm choosing. But Syracuse is on the list. Cal's on the list. Rutgers. Maryland, who knows? Miami, obviously.
I'm going to start with UW, and then as I get better at the game, which is a far way off at this point,
right?
I'm going to pick like a reclamation project, whether it's a power conference team that's just terrible and trying to get them up, or it's a group of 5 team that I want to try and get into a bigger conference.
Right. Oh, I see. I'm okay. In that case, I'm looking towards Tulane also.
Yeah, somebody like that.
Great uniform.
I love my trip to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl.
Exactly.
So there you have it. Najee and I are. Probably not going to do a podcast for 2 months because we're playing NCAA football. No, we'll be back next week.
Week.
Opening a Seahawks training camp. We also have a special guest WWE is coming to Seattle in September for SmackDown at Climate Pledge Arena, and one of the stars of that brand, SmackDown, is joining the KOMO Sports End Zone podcast.
That's a hell of a tease.
It's a heck of a tease, and but I'm very excited about that. So we'll bring you that next week, as well as any moves the Mariners make. So for Najee, I'm Niko. One last thing to say.
Adam, bring him back.
Bring back the Sonics.
Bring him back, Adam.
We'll see you next week.